Good morning, everybody, and welcome to GovX Digital 2021. So, for this morning, we will be meeting with a group of digital leaders from across the UK and local, particularly focusing on local government and looking at what's been going on in the local government space. And great to hear from folk about what we've been through over the last 12 months. But again, a lot of what we're going to focus on is where next and where we go forward with. So, I'm David Wild, I'm the GM for GovX Digital. 20 years in central government, 14 years in local government, and then crossed to the dark side, but I'm in the light today. So I'd just like everybody to introduce themselves briefly. So Deborah, if you'd like to start, and we'll work round and then we'll get on to it.
Good morning, I'm Dr. Deborah Smart. I'm Corporate Director for Digital and Change at Dorset Council.
Great, thanks very much. And Sandra?
So I'm Sandra Taylor. I'm the Assistant Director for IT and Digital at Worcestershire County Council.
Great, thanks very much, Sandra. Good to see you. Glenn?
Hey, I'm Glenn Ochcore. I'm the head of local government here at MadeTech, having spent a decade in the sector itself.
Well, and he wins with the garden in the background, just saying. Tarek.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tarek Khan. I'm Chief Digital and Information Officer at London Borough of Camden and a relative newbie to local government and private and public sector in general. So really excited about being here.
Cool. And the one question, Tarek doesn't know this, but the others I did ask, one question I'm just going to quickly ask each of you and we'll come back to it at the end. What's the one big thing you're going to focus on in the next 12 months, Deborah?
I think for me, and as at Dorset Council being a relatively new council, it's embedding the culture change we've managed to bring through the pandemic. We've really focused on sticking to the service design approach and being agile, encouraging people to test and learn because we've just had to get on with it. And we want to really mainstream that. For those colleagues that maybe haven't quite got there yet, we're going to be focusing on that.
Great, thanks. And for you, Sandra?
Well, this is possibly cheating a little bit, but we've just launched our digital strategy. So that encompasses a number of things, but importantly, it includes our smarter ways of working and the transition into the new norm once we move, out of COVID.
Yeah, digital strategy counts at one. You're good with that. Cool, cheers. Glenn?
Oh, for me, it's kind of a twofer. We've got, for me, it's all about data, but also not just data in general and how it gets used and so on, but how we can drag it out of ancient legacy systems, where we've got sort of 20th century tech being used in so many cases and actually allow people to make use of it. That's going to be harder than ever.
Thanks very much. And last, Tarek, what about yourself?
For me, so for me, it's about really, I've come in from not a non-traditional sort of CIO role. So, and I've always concentrated on the sort of customer experience side of things. So really my priority is going to be around making sure that we're building our products and services around the needs of our citizens over and above everything else.
Excellent. So focus I'm getting from all of you is focus on structure, getting systems working, getting strategy going, how we're going to take advantage of what digital's there to help our organisations flourish as we move out of the pandemic and try and do something about building back better. So in terms of just playing back on that, a little bit of, I think, look back, look forward now, just around vision for service delivery. And what I'm keen to hear from each of you is what is your vision for service delivery and what are the pressures that you've got shaping that vision? But also let's play in the last 12 months because we've had a bit of a time and see how that may have influenced and changed that. So Deborah, over to yourself.
I think the vision for service delivery, as I've said, for us is to really push forward with this inclusive, centered on our community's approach to change, which we set out as part of the new council, but we've really demonstrated, certainly in pockets, that can really work and add benefit to citizens and the community. I think we've got some challenges. We've obviously got a big financial challenge, having picked up quite a large bill with regards to our response to COVID. And so, for example, our transformation programme, which was focused on bringing the councils together and saving some money, it is now being accelerated threefold. So we're talking about trying to save about 10 million a year rather than about 3 million a year and designing really good new services for customers. So I think for me, it is about really understanding what our customers and citizens want. It's about building on some of the stuff we've done in COVID around the community response, where we've allowed the community to come and step in. We haven't stepped on their toes. We've given given them space, but we've also helped with some of that leadership piece, but not the doing too. So how can we use that in the future to shape our service deliveries, particularly in the people services? And then I think it's also for us about just getting things sorted out still, because we're still quite a new authority. We've still got some things to untangle and get really sorted out. I'm really proud that we've managed to continue with some of those projects during the pandemic, but not all. So we do need to work with our colleagues across the council, particularly those in the districts, coming together to really form that one new Dorset Council service.
Great, thanks very much, Deborah. And Sandra, how about Worcestershire?
Well, as you'll be aware, David, we have been looking at our strategy for customer service delivery, you know, and as part of that, we've developed what our vision is for what good looks like. So it's around our simple access across channels. It's about our customers being dealt with by, you know, proactive staff who know what they're talking about. It's about completing transactions at point of first contact, and you know, really focusing on delivering value to our customers, and one of my particular bugbears is making sure that we've got you know, we're open about it, that you've got visibility of what services we're delivering and when and how and what we're doing. You know, so in terms of our vision, you know, it's around empowering people, being accessible, supporting communities and connecting people. So, you know, the sort of the backdrop of pressures that we're dealing with this, you know, apart from COVID, you know, it's, you know, customer service demands are changing. You know, even before COVID, they were moving from, you know, physical and phone towards digital service methods, and COVID turbocharged all of that. You know, our customers don't expect to have to navigate through mazes to get to our services. They just expect things to be done when they first contact us, and for us to know about previous contacts or previous journeys to get into their services. And you know, we've got to meet those customer expectations and balance efficiencies that we need to deliver with, at the end of the day, delivering that value to our customers.
Yeah, and the big standout with for me over the last year came out was your Here to Help agenda, and your Here to Help approach, which was so refreshing, about being not about the council.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was a real kind of standout for me in terms of what I saw over the last year from the public sector side. And yourself, Glenn?
Well, for me, it's about supporting and encouraging people who want to really take that step to outcomes-based delivery. Certainly back in my day, when I was in local government, whenever you wanted to deliver something, certainly digital, it was about, okay, now let's find a platform, and then let's kind of crowbar our needs around that, and let's crowbar the outcomes we want to achieve around whatever a platform does, instead of stepping back and thinking, well, you know, what are we trying to achieve? What we're trying to do for ourselves and with our partners and so on, and let's work on that. And yes, buying platforms has its place. Platforms, you know, they've been built for a reason, but realistically, most of them don't get used in the right ways. They don't, you know, nobody uses 100% of functionality, so they end up commissioning 2, 3, 4, 5 different platforms in order to use 100% of the functionality required. So for me, it's about, local government hasn't got money, hasn't got time, hasn't got people to continue doing that. It really is about saying what we're trying to achieve, and then how can we build and or buy systems and edit and kind of evolve and develop them in a way that not only allows us to really focus on what we're trying to achieve, but then allows us to build functionality in a way that can be reused. We shouldn't be buying something and then buying something separate across a different service and a different department and directorate. We should be building things that can just be rolled out and out and out, and most importantly for me, shared with other partners as well. There's no reason that we don't build things and then share it with other councils, other places around the entire country. I don't like the idea that a small number of big suppliers are charging absolutely everyone for the same tools over and over and over again. Yeah, I want to break that wheel if I can.
Yeah, and it gets you into the whole kind of open versus closed data standards issue that I think we've been battling for 40 years in the tech world, and still continue to battle with, I think it's fair to say. Yeah,
we have indeed, but I think this COVID situation has given us a massive hammer to smash that with, that we just didn't have before.
Cool. So over to yourself, Tarek. Thanks very much, Glenn.
So yeah, in terms of ultimate vision for service design, I think that simply is kind of to reduce complexity and make it easier for citizens to interact with the London Borough of Camden. What I think, where I think we need to look at as well is making sure we deliver a consistently positive and interwoven experience across both online and offline touch points. You know, if you're looking at a citizen first approach, they don't just, you know, use one channel and that's it. You have to look at the whole world view in terms of how they interact with Camden at various different points in time. So I'm really keen on doing that. And in many cases, we're actually looking at how technology complements the human experience rather than replacing it. So really making sure that we're not, you know, we're not thinking about it in the silo of just technology, but you can get technology and data as a powerful enabler in order to deliver the kind of experiences that we're after. In terms of pressures, you know, it's the standard thing, if I'm honest with you, which is private and public sector. When you're moving from a technology first to a citizen first approach, it's the legacy systems, the legacy structures that you have within the councils, and thereby the budgets as well. Also, one of the things that's really shone a light post-COVID, I think, is that you know, it's really that there's something someone said to me, which is, you know, early on in this in the COVID pandemic, people were saying we're all in the same boat. Well, actually, what we found out was we're all in the same storm, but lots of people are in very different boats. And so it's really shone a light on the digital divide for us, and making sure that when we're delivering these sort of digital services, that we're factoring in all of those different types of people with their different, you know, different levels of access to technology and access to sort of, you know, broadband and bits and pieces like that as well. But saying that, there's also lots of opportunities too. Post-COVID, there's obviously been more citizens interacting digitally. And we've seen some really surprising, well, I've personally seen some really surprising little green shoots come out. Like I've seen the resurgence of things like QR codes, which were seen as you know, as a bit of a weird colloquial thing that was happening in Japan and Korea. But now, actually, I've seen its implementation, and it's quite a cheap and effective way of kind of bridging that online and offline gap. So that's a really interesting thing. And then, you know, to Glenn's point, I think the data is really, I mean, coming from private to public sector, we run 600 different lines of business. And that means a huge you know, intersection between different sort of interactions. And if we can harness the power of that data in a transparent and ethical way, I think there's some really cool applications specifically for early intervention and prevention within our communities too. So yeah, lots of pressures and lots of opportunities as well.
Actually, that's a really good point on the digital divide piece. I mean, we all probably seen it to a greater lesser extent, how education really brought that out into the open. Kids, whether they could learn at home or not, really front of soul, didn't it, in such an obvious way. And actually QR code point was really good, wasn't it? Personal hygiene. Suddenly touchscreens were very out of favor. So what do we do about it? Oh, QR. It kind of resurfaces the tech. We've got a question in actually, which builds nicely on the kind of stuff you've mentioned there, which I think it's that kind of below the surface question that we know we're going to have to address. And the question, and I'll pass around all of you quickly on it. Are the panelists experiencing a conflict between customer-centered, oh, hold on a sec, just get around, moved a bit, yeah, between customer-centric and MTFS driven reviews, especially in relation to timescale and benefits realization? So customer-centric, money. Deborah.
Well, in fact, throughout my whole career, I've encouraged people to focus on the customer, and if we do the right things for the customers in all the different ways that colleagues on here have reflected, the money falls out of the system. Because actually we tend to design very complex systems in local government, or we just build on them. So we've got a kind of huge legacy at the bottom. If we simplify some of that, just concentrate on doing exactly what we need to do for customers there and then, a bit like Sandra was reflecting in her customer first strategy, my experience is the money falls away. And I think the benefit that we've learned from COVID is, going to Glenn's point, we don't have to buy new platforms to do that. We can do it with the platforms we've got. We just need to be thinking in that agile way. So I don't see it as a conflict. I see it as the way to solve the financial problem, actually.
Brilliant. Sandra?
I agree. I think there's a win-win situation here. You know, when you look at the lean thinking methodologies, if you cut out all the waste and stop doing the stuff that doesn't add any value to our customers, actually get a leaner, more cost-effective process. I mean, what we have done, which is that we have really focused on our customers and communities over the last few months, and I've often over the years had conversations about digital excludes, etc. And don't get me wrong, I'm very focused on that is a digital exclusion issue. But what I also feel is it opens up different channels, and you know, giving people equal opportunity is about giving them different ways to achieve the same result. And digital isn't in my head about, well, we're going to move everybody to digital. It's just about moving the bulk of people who can and want to do it, and then you can focus those resources that the precious resources you have on the people that actually need a different approach to it.
Yeah.
So I don't think there is a conflict.
No, that's a really good point. And I'm going to jump to Tarek now, and then I'll come back to the supply side in a minute with you, Glenn. So Tarek, your thoughts around that? So cost, money.
Yeah, so we're quite lucky at Camden in that the way that the budgets are worked are very outcomes based. So there's always a sort of alignment there around trying to deliver outcomes rather than outputs. Obviously, some of those can be fiscal as well. And I think at this point in time, I think it is about looking at the long-term value. It's that phrase, isn't it? Value for money. And it's actually a lot of the time within a lot of these cost-cutting exercises, they're focusing on the money bit of it, but not the value. But when you've got like a progressive finance function, which I think we have, then it's really about having that outcome that you're both trying to focus on and working out what the best approach is to getting there. And you know, in the long term, a lot of the time with some things that we're talking about with using technology, there are inherent cost savings in that, and not that they're the key thing for me or for when you're taking a customer-centered approach, but it is by its very nature something where you're trying to deliver value to a larger mass of people.
Yeah, that's great, Tarek. Yeah, cool. And Glenn, so from the other side, when you must hear this all the time.
Oh, absolutely. And I freely admit that I've got a little bit of confirmation bias because we're lucky enough to work with a lot of people who really get the kind of agile, quick, iterative development side of things. Yeah. But that being said, that's not the only people I want to work with. I definitely want to work with those who are facing those challenges to help them prove the value of this, because in some ways, this is never, ever have users been more at the heart of every conversation. It's all about what users need, because the user need has gone up so exponentially over the past 12, 18 months. So people who have never had those conversations before are now thinking in that way, and not thinking, what does my service need? But, you know, because it's easy to slip into that rut, and I know I did it at times. It's always now, well, what do we need to achieve? What do we need to achieve for the people we're working with and working for, especially the most vulnerable people? And the beauty about the kind of agile process is you can do things really quickly as government policy shifts, as needs shift, as new things come on board. You can work very, very quickly and iteratively. I know in one place in Hackney, we worked when some funding needed to be distributed very quickly. We were able to spin up a team in sort of 3 days and have something online within a week. And then when that shifted the week later, we iterate and we iterate and we iterate. And that mindset proved that value. It was a very small project to start with, but it proved that worked, and it gave the internal confidence that worked, which can then be used to build on and build on and build on. So for me, it's always about starting small. You know, don't try and boil the ocean, just take a cup, get that boiled, and then that will allow you then to fire up the cauldron for the next lot.
No, that's really good. And for the oldies like me, I remember the old John Seddon stuff from 20 years ago with Vanguard, and similar with Lean, you know, and the messages haven't changed. If you take failure demand out, you save money. It's a bit of a no-brainer, that piece. And then it's just a question of what is to extract that to make sure you get that return over time. So I think in many respects, it's something that's always been with us, and what tech's enabling it to do is to do it better, faster, you know, quicker and faster, and actually at lower risk, which is fantastic. Yeah. So moving on to the next sort of area we want to pick up on, and it's a bit of personal time for each of you now, which is what we'd like to hear about is your favourite programme, what's the one, you know, career-wise, the one thing that really you stand behind, and just share with us a bit about why and what the impact of it was. So, Deborah.
I'm going to pick a recent one, I think, from Dorset, which is around what we ended up calling the skills agency, which was to do with COVID. So as we could see, and we were still at work, so this was a bit before we ended up into lockdown. We could see that we might have problems. We were thinking about it primarily as operational managers being off sick with COVID themselves. Now, we've been quite fortunate in Dorset not to have had quite a lot of infection, so we didn't actually suffer this. But we started off in early March thinking, well, what would we do? How many good managers do we have, for example, in the corporate centre that could potentially go and run a frontline operational service if that service started to be impacted by sickness? So we reached out into the corporate centre, which is where I'm situated, and asked staff, you know, would they be prepared to go and work at the highways depot, for example? Would they be prepared to do this? Anyway, as we got into full lockdown and services were then closed, we had a different kind of problem. We had a huge number of staff who didn't have any work to go to because their centre of operation had been closed down or shut to prevent the spread of the pandemic. And at the same time, we then had to stand up services to support the community. And so what we called the skills agency started off being one thing, but it morphed into being something else. And it morphed into supporting people to do jobs that they'd never done before. So we had people who'd always worked in libraries, and they went to go and help colleagues when we could open the household waste sites to make sure people were social distancing. So it was about really persuading and helping people to step up and step in to the gap that had been caused, but also the huge demand. So we didn't have to employ extra resources. I think the reflection for me was it wasn't very digital. So our back end ERP system meant it was completely impossible for us to identify quickly who those staff might be. We have absolutely no idea of all the skills and talents that our staff have that could bring to some emergencies like this. And there's some lessons learned for us now going forward around how do we have, you know, a good enough bank of staff who are DBS checked, because in this latter end of the pandemic, we've had people obviously in care homes and in hospitals supporting colleagues in the NHS and in the private sector. But actually, we've reduced the net of people so much that actually we haven't got enough slack in that system, and we don't know anybody else who might secretly be HGV trained or be able to speak other languages or British Sign Language. All of those good things, we don't know anything about that in our staff. We just know about ourselves. So we had to do a huge data collection exercise to get some of this going, but we managed that, but not with very good tech. So for me, it's about how do we sort of automate that a bit the next time. I think the lesson going forward is when we need to stand up a project, how can we look into the organisation and really help people to take on a new challenge? We don't always need new teams of people to do things. We sometimes can find that slack if we really search for it. But also people can do completely different jobs in the face of standing up and being a public servant, which is why we all do the jobs that we do, I think. And absolutely outstanding work done, people right out of their comfort zone, from doing one thing to doing something completely different, just to help and support the community. So I think I'm really proud of leading that, all the different iterations, and I could write a book about it. I think all the different things, how we expected it to be one way and then it ended up being something different, all the changes, and it's still living today, of course, in case we have to do surge testing. But so I think I'm really proud of that, of how helping the organisation to respond in that way.
That's a really good example. I think back to what Tarek was saying, that really kind of, for me, demonstrates the huge breadth of skills and capability we have in public services, and what do we really know about it, and how much more can we do with it. Sandra.
So I suppose the example I'm particularly proud of is in which we've spun up lots of different systems very rapidly using agile methodologies and our low-code platform. We've built and designed and delivered 22 actually in just a matter of a few months. But the one thing that stands out is really around our community collaboration, our Here to Help. So, I mean, we've seen a real step change in collaboration, with our residents and our faith groups and our businesses who've been incredibly generous and selfless coming forward to help in whatever they can do. and that real community spirit, it needs nurturing and enabling. So one of the key factors that's enabled that to happen is I think something that the council can be very rightly proud of. So we've opened up practical mechanisms to facilitate those lines of communication, and we call that Here to Help. And it brings together the safeguarding to protect the individuals, and it brings together the support. So what it does is it allows individuals to request help wherever they are in the county, whatever it is, whether it's shopping or whatever it is, getting, you know, prescriptions, etc. And it then also enables individuals, our own staff, our businesses and voluntary organisations who've offered support, and then the council brings them together. So the system will allow easy matching of requests. It'll match them geographically. It'll then look at the safeguarding, you know, have the volunteers got the right DBS checking or whatever that might be, and it allows that matching. And where we haven't got a match between the support that's needed, then the council can step in and flex and fill in that gap. And we've also augmented that with the information we put on our website and our self-help resources and our, you know, the facilities for these requests and offers, and the sharing of information between the voluntary groups. And I think it's been a fantastic example, you know, a real can-do approach, a real corporate initiative from the design with our customer services team managing requests that come in non-digitally, and just the real corralling of resources across the council.
Yeah, and it's community resilience for real, rather than the abstract, which is great.
Yeah,
you know, yeah, it's fantastic. Glenn, pick a winner.
I was thinking about things I'm proud of, and I could go back to kind of youth worky type things and participatory budgeting. But I think it's one of the much more recent. Oh, it was a good day. We had keypads and everything. But one of the much more recent ones, we're working with one of the unitaries. Oh, by the way, Sandra, I absolutely love that with the Here to Help. I'd love to share some of the work we're doing with one of the London boroughs on that as well, because we've got we're doing loads of stuff. I'll definitely catch up with you about that one. But one thing we're doing with one of the unitaries at the moment is helping them to get much more of a single view of the customer. I'm not talking about sort of one account to rule them all type thing, but it is about working with them on their data architecture, their data infrastructure, understanding where that data is already held, and then making sure that all of that can be linked through APIs, linked in various different ways, and standardized to bring it all together. Now, the reason I'm proud of it is because, you know, it's an incredible piece of work. And when we started working on it, you know, there were people saying, you know, it's far too complex. You'll never be able to get that sort of data out. You'll never be able to standardize it. Look, just do it piece by piece and a little bit here and a little bit there. And we saw the opportunity to do something more holistic. And because that work, and because of the work we did in partnership with that unitary, and they were fantastic in it, it brought data together to such an extent that before Christmas, a number of families who would have been made homeless were not made homeless. Now, for me, that is worth every single phone call, every piece of work, every meeting, every late night, everything possible that we could possibly do, because that matters. And I love knowing that the work we're doing, tapping away on keyboards, is affecting real lives. And if, you know, if anything we're doing day to day isn't making life better for someone, then we probably shouldn't be doing it. And so to have that to hang our hats on, it's it certainly gave me a warm glow inside.
Yeah, it's a good one. And again, really real on some of the most vulnerable in society. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good. Nice one on the money. Tarek.
Yeah, so I came in actually into Camden midway through the pandemic. So it was quite an eye-opener for me. You know, first time to local government, coming in through the midway through the pandemic. And what I saw was truly inspirational. I mean, the amount of, so it's very difficult to pick, and answer your question, it's very difficult to pick one, because what I saw was a number of digital services that had been stood up in record time and were right off the bat being able to deliver real value and make, and, you know, to Glenn's point, really make a significant difference in our to our citizens that sort of needed help most. Everything from sort of helping community services deliver aid to those that need it most, to right through to helping residents find work, following on from, you know, the challenges around employment. one of the executions that I found particularly impressive was, and this is kind of like a piece of functionality that we're looking to translate across a number of different services, is how we converted a number of disparate data points into a heat map across the borough, and which sort of illustrates need, where we need to, which parts of the borough we need to focus on most. So for an easy example, to illustrate that point, in terms of food aid, that it's very easy to sort of disseminate lots of complex information into an easily digestible map, so that the community volunteer forces can go and focus their sort of operations around those specific areas, and I think that sort of way of taking complexity and making it easily accessible is a really powerful sort of application, and really impressed that they did that within the time that we've had. I think probably for me specifically, it would be some of the help that we've given around the digital divide. So Camden has one of the reasons I joined Camden is because it's got a very strong social value streak and a real drive to want to tackle inequality. So as soon as the borough, the council sort of started understanding about the challenges that school children are having with not just devices, but access to sort of broadband, they really jumped to the call for action, and me and the team were really involved in getting thousands of laptops and getting them to the people that needed it most, so that it wasn't that it wasn't affecting any more than it needed to. The pandemic wasn't affecting people any more than it needed to. In terms of challenges, I think with all of this, what you're doing is you're moving at pace, but it's about trying to bring people along with that journey as well. So these councils are huge. There's lots of people around it, and if we're trying to deliver at pace, it really is very key. And one of the things that I'm sort of building in now is a real strong core of radical transparency, a need for communications, a need for participation, council-wide and across to our communities as well.
Great, thanks, Tarek. We've had a couple of other questions come in as well, so I'm going to quickly squeeze these in before we get into the next one. So let's get some punchy answers to these ones. So the first one is historically, telecare alarms seem to have been driven by lowest cost. Yeah, we all know this old chestnut, right? And reacting to trauma after the event. But preventive and predictive analytics can reduce the cost of care, but it's more expensive. How do you make the case for going for the predictive and analytics version over the good old tried and trusted but cheap as chips telecare? Deborah.
Well, I would say show people. So, I mean, everyone on this call probably know we're going to have a problem with telecare alarms anyway when we switch off all the copper. But the approach we've taken in Dorset is to, before the pandemic, I hasten to add, we've set up a tech lounge. So with some of the assisted technology that either people can afford to buy for themselves or that we are working with health partners to invest in, to show occupational therapists, people who might be going into people's homes, indeed the people themselves can come and experience what it might be like to ask a robot to open the curtains, all of those things that are there and available, alongside some more expensive, more high-end kind of technologies. So people can come and experience it for themselves. We can demonstrate what it can do to the people who are then specifying that equipment, and working across with health partners who are picking up large parts of some of the bills, particularly if we're only reacting to trauma, and working across in partnership with our ICS colleagues. We can afford it. In fact, we can't afford not to, particularly in Dorset, as we've one of the highest elderly population in the country.
You do, yeah. Sandra.
I mean, it's a difficult one because there's so many pressures on that area in terms of resources. Sometimes it's about, well, how do you make the space to actually look at what might be better in the long run? But I agree with Deborah. I think you've got to really show it. You've got to actually show what the benefits are, not just monetary wise, but in terms of quality of life. And I think perhaps make the case in terms of one of the, I suppose, the way we're structured with social services over here and the NHS over here is that, you don't see where the impacts are in terms of the measures you take in social services and the impact it has in the acute areas in the NHS. So it's perhaps trying to look at that business case in the round, you know, and bring together those two sides of the coins to, you know, it's obviously the quality of life that we're giving to people, but actually that financial element across NHS and social care.
Yeah, great. Yeah, Tarek?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's all about looking at long-term value versus short-term value, right? So what we're doing is when we're talking about a lot of this stuff, we're talking about a specific outcome that we're looking to achieve. But actually, what tends to happen is, you know, there's a lot of value that comes out of what you don't know yet. So I always give the example of sort of, you know, when they flew the rocket to the moon. The whole point with NASA working with a lot of these agencies was, you know, getting that rocket up to the moon. But actually, there were so many different bits and pieces that came out of that. I think loads of the technology in smartphones is based around a lot of the inventions that came through that. And so I think it's that there is a part around delivering long-term value versus short-term value, but there's also you know, getting people in the right mindset of when you are innovating and when you are looking at trying new different ways in which to do things, we're opening ourselves up for a more innovative approach. We're opening ourselves up to start looking at things in a slightly different way with a different perspective, and that can help us in a number of different avenues.
Yeah, it's great. And Glenn?
Two quick ones from me. One, do the sums again. 10 years ago, yeah, it would cost a fortune to have a heart rate monitor, to have a blood pressure monitor in a house, to have had a full detector and all that. Now you can get all of that, a couple £100, Apple Watch. Actually, you've got all that functionality already built in. We've come so far when it comes to technology that we're basing our mindsets on thinking that was accurate 10, 15, 20 years ago. But these days, actually, we can do modern challenges require modern solutions. So definitely do the sums again. And secondly, also, I can't recommend highly enough, have a Google of Savvy, SAVVI, and vulnerability. This is a project that's being led in partnership with MHCLG and Sedgemoor and so on, where they are looking at prevention. They are looking at spotting vulnerability before it becomes vulnerable. You know, there are a whole suite of life events that are going to happen to people that are going to increase your levels of potential vulnerability. And just understanding what's going on, understanding the data, where that's held, and bringing that together allows you to do some of that prevention work. And it just helps to build the case that this isn't you striking out and coming up with some random idea to do this. This is based on reality. This is based on science and fact. And you can actually, the prevention work is real, and it's you know, it adds up financially because we can't afford not to do it anymore.
And I think there's a whole raft of questions coming through here, which we will answer, you know, after this particular session, but we'll make sure we get answers to them, because actually what you're raising is actually sparking other things. But I think it does take us nicely onto that other bit, that last topic that I'm very keen to cover on. I don't think there's any doubt, you know, local authorities, we are at a key moment of transition right now. You know, we have been on one hell of a roller coaster ride over the last 12 months, compounded by what we've gone on before that. But question for each of you now really is, how do we hold on to the gains as we come out of lockdown? And as we do face upcoming financial challenges, it's not going to go away, there's a big bill there, right? And how do we stop the pendulum swinging back to the old business as usual? So Deborah, how do we hold on? How do we move forward?
We've been thinking a lot about this in Dorset, so because we need to move forward anyway, being a new council, we've still got some things, as I talked about at the beginning, to help people with that transition. I'm not sure if people would let us go back. So I think there's something for me around the kind of relationships we've built up with the community, with town and parish councils, with businesses through the pandemic, where we've worked with them to help them step in. I'm not sure they want us to go back to what we were like before, which was probably more authoritarian, if I'm honest. And I'm not sure staff want to go back either. You know, we already had a programme that was setting out to reduce the number of buildings that we worked from, having inherited quite a significant property estate from the previous authorities. And I think originally we would have felt we'd been quite bold and ambitious for the kind of desk ratios we had talked about previously. And now when we ask people, what is their experience like and how do they want to do their work and can we balance customer need and their own personal circumstances, they don't want to go back either. So I think the challenge is for us is holding on to those things and making them really work, because there are some differences about everybody working from home as distinct from some people potentially being in the office or in different settings. Now those things open up, and that kind of hybrid working. I think there is something about, for me, really building on this community asset that we've built up. We've built up a lot of goodwill. We've built up a lot of strong relationships with the voluntary sector and towns and parish councils. For us being a new unitary authority in Dorset, that's particularly important, that we're not seen to be remote. So how do we really forge ahead with that conversation with our communities? How can they step in and step up? And I think, lastly, it is about how we continue to demonstrate the value of some of the things that we've done in an agile, quick way. So much as my skills agency example didn't involve much technology, we have had other instances where we've just grasped the nettle, and where we've been asked to do something in a specific way, we've said, well, actually, no, the best way might be to do this in an iterative approach so that we can actually automate it end to end. And there's some really good examples of that around business grants, where in the first wave of money that came through, the kind of direction from the top was, let's just get a form up on the website. And the team gently pushed back and said, well, we can do that to start with, but can we keep on working on it so we can automate it end to end? And of course they did. And thank goodness they did, because goodness only knows what we'd have done with all that paper. We'd have been absolutely swamped. So I think for me, there's something that has taught us there that we want to push forward with, which is about demonstrating, showing people you can do it. It's not going to take forever for us to do this, and it's the right thing to do for the citizens of Dorset and for those businesses to get their money as quickly as possible. So I think there's a number of different things there, but I think that all of those are threads that feed through into transformation. I think lastly, just picking up on what Tarek's saying about digital exclusion, people tend to think of rural Dorset as really wealthy, and that's true in some parts, but it isn't in others. And in fact, our digital strategy, we've put a whole page around, what our best assessment is now of people who are digitally excluded. We're working on trying to get a digital skills partnership set up and to really funnel that tech out to people who need it. And that's something which won't go away now for us. So I think those are the kind of legacy bits, but the bits that we're taking forward.
Brilliant. And 2-to-1 desk ratio sounds so tame these days, doesn't it, Sandra?
Yes, so I think it's important to note, though, that many council services are continuing to operate during the pandemic. Our bins have been emptied, our planning applications have been granted, and of course our council bills arrived as normal on our doorsteps in March. So I think for many service areas, we've already moved to a new norm. And I think there's a leadership challenge there to make sure that we just hold fast on that and make sure that staff, who I think as Deborah's already said, they don't want to go back to the norm anyway. It's just so there's a leadership challenge there, just to say, well, actually, we support this and we want to forge ahead. So I think there's also an opportunity created by the panic. So however unwanted it was, it has opened up the doors in terms of how we're engaging with our communities, and our focus on people and doing things that support them in the community. Local government's got such a pivotal role to play in strengthening community, its resilience, improving our local places and our communities, and I think it's incumbent on us to sort of lead the sort of multi-agency recovery initiatives that we're going to need, that really focus on what that bright future could be. So those recovery strategies are absolutely critical, and I know lots of councils are building. In fact, some councils have had more than one iteration of recovery as we've gone up and down in terms of where we are with COVID, but really focusing on everyone. Everyone has been affected by the pandemic, and these recovery strategies need to focus on us all, and basically talking about that future state that we want to get to. Not the past is the past now. Let's focus on where we want to be.
Yeah, past is another country and all that. Absolutely right. Glenn?
3 quick things from me. And quick is the operative word in the first one. Keep the pace up. We've built a pace over the last 18 months, and yes, it's been breakneck, and yes, it's been, you know, backbreaking and challenging and hard, but it is up. And so much, we've seen 6 years of development happen in 6 months in some cases. It's incredible what's been achieved. And it's so much harder to get things started than it is to maintain them and keep momentum going on them. So for any sake, just keep the pace up, keep working at it. Don't think, you know what, we got through that. Let's just take a breath, because we won't be able to get back up to speed. It will take years to recover from slowing down. So we need to keep that pace up. And in order to do that, the second thing is start adding up the sums. Yes, we are working differently because we have to. But actually, we are making not just financial savings, but time savings and doing things better at the same time as doing them more cheaply. And that in the past wasn't a simple thing to be able to do. So making the justification now, not just in terms of, you know, this is nice, we should be doing this, but actually this makes sense from a business point of view. It does. We know that unarguably. So make sure that is solid in your business cases, and start. I've got visions of a grand totalizer of the amount of time that's been saved and the amount of effort that's been saved, not just for the business, but also by residents as well. Every process that you can take from a 5-day process down to a 5-minute process, which is possible, it just adds up so much time for your residents, which they can then be using for far more interesting things. And one of the things they can be investing in terms of your staff, is my final point, is investing in them and their skills. One thing, we've done a horrible backronym thing for MadeTech in terms of modernising, accelerating digital data, and the last one's the important one: enable. Enable your staff, give them the skills to do these things themselves, and they will find these opportunities. They will find the ways of working, and do so in a way that doesn't tie you into any particular vendor. You lose that vendor lock-in, and you get kind of control of your own destiny. The moment we're working on a project at MadeTech and we're able to, you know, hand over the keys and just say, you know what, this is yours. You don't need us. We'll help you if you want, and we'll help evolve and develop and make this better. But this is yours. You run it, you own it, you can do what you want with it, take it to different services, share it with the world. That for me is the most magical, best moment, because that's when an organization really gets it. And so if you invest that time and effort in your staff, upskilling them, then you'll be able to institutionally maintain this pace of evolution that's absolutely vital to sustaining and developing in the next few years.
Brilliant. Okay, last word, Tarek.
Yeah, so I think I agree with a lot of what's been said on the panel already. I think the way that I've come in and approached it is I'm looking at it as sort of 2 work streams that run in parallel. One's from top down and the other one's from bottom up. When we look at from the bottom up, I absolutely agree with Glenn. A lot of it is about keeping the pace. It's making sure that you're focusing on people, process and technology in that order. So it is really about enabling and making sure that we've got the capabilities internally to consistently keep doing what we're doing. But I also think that there's another stream, which is the top-down approach, which is where it's really important that we start creating organisational alignment across the council. And to that point, CAMS has been really progressive. We're working with the UCL's Institute of Public Policy and Innovation at the moment, and using a missions-based framework, which basically talks about some of the key sort of outcomes that we're trying to achieve for the borough. And I've been involved in that, and we're going to be working in a way that means that the whole council is aligned around some of these outcomes, and then that's going to kind of feed into the strategy for my department. And then following on from that, I'm implementing a number of different sort of tools and techniques in order to sort of translate our strategy within the department into sort of weekly activities using a number of different sort of principles like OKRs, and I'm also a big fan of Amazon's sort of working backwards approach, which I've been sort of trying to bake into some of the bits and pieces that we're doing at the moment. So yeah, top down, bottom up, we should be in a good place.
Brilliant. Great. So we are out of time, slightly overrun, but hey, it was worth it because of what we're covering. The last thought I was going to just pick up on that. HMRC, 10 days to build a furlough system that actually gave money out instead of taking it off everyone. How amazing was that?
That's incredible, and it's wonderful because it proves if they can do it at that complexity, so can we. We just need to start that journey. The journey that isn't started is the one that takes longest to finish.
Right. So we really are out of time. So I just want to say last thing, which is thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Sandra, Glenn, and Tarek. Fascinating conversation. To the attendees, we'll get some answers to the questions and get them out there. But great conversation, great start to the morning. Have a great day, everybody, and thank you. Cheers. Then. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.